in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Gather, gather around indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Case Closed, highest level conversations on the most relevant topics in the land, in the YouTube streets. As you come in, go ahead and click that like button. Super chat, as my man, one man, has already done. Lazy youth, lazy youth, lazy youth. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I have a variety of things that we're going to be opining on today. As per usual, got the all-star panel. How's it going, LAR?
Sorry about that. I had it on mute. It's great.
It's great. It's great. It's great. How's it going, Kaizo?
Yeah, it's good.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So we're going to start this off by talking about Google employees. Did you hear about this? Did you hear about this? LAR, Google fires 28 staff after protest against cloud contract with Israel, basically protesting the situation in Gaza, right? And they got fired, right? Google says that the employees engaged in completely unacceptable behavior during sit-ins at company offices. So your general reaction, do you think that they thought they were going to get fired? And in other words, was this some kind of a thing where they were so entitled and their expectations were that this was going to be somehow allowed? Or do you think that they just laid down these pretty cushy jobs? Or you think it's just kind of a stepping stone to go into, I don't know. Go ahead. What are your reactions to the situation?
I think it's BS and it's hypocritical. And if it all depends on the race or ethnicity of the people fired to see if they're going to get compensated or not. I mean, it's weird to me that, and this happens too much in America. You have Americans who always worried about people other places, but never worried about people in this country. So I didn't know you had a heart for Palestine. You had a heart for the Palestinians. When did you care? Let me guess, in the last few months. Their issues have been escalating for decades. So now that it hit the news, you care. As far as Google is concerned, I'm sorry, you think it's Google? I can't believe they did that and they're helping these people. I'm sure they're helping a bunch of other people too. I'm pretty sure, of other countries. And if it's somebody that the United States is an enemy of, like if Google's helping somebody, that's an ally of us against the enemy, they don't have a problem. And lastly,
yeah, it's like you being the only cement supplier in town, right? The mob runs construction, and then years later, you're like, I can't believe LAR Cement was selling to the mob. It's like, it's Google. They're the top of this information stuff. Okay, right? Of course, they're doing business with everybody. But anyways, go ahead, finish your point.
Lastly, I'm going to just say this. if you were so smart at Google, look at all the black people who protested in the last 10 years and what happened to them. Why would you think you would be any different? But if there's a bunch of white people, they're gonna make a movie about them in 5-10 years because these are freedom fighters. So just depends on who did it.
Ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and click that like button as you come in. Right, we're saying Google has fired 28 employees following a sit down, I should say, protest over the tech giant's contract to provide cloud computing and artificial intelligence services to the government of Israel. Right, the termination, right, the firing came after the group number one, after the group No Tech for Apartheid, right? That's the name of the group. On Tuesday, occupied Google's offices in California and New York. So it was like a bimodal thing going on here to protest the 1.2 billion, I believe, contract known as Project Nimbus, ladies and gentlemen. Nagone, how's it going? Can you hear me? Microphone check on Nagone. You are muted, I believe, but
okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes. We hear you loud and clear. So, yeah, and hopefully you've been hearing us. So just initial reactions here regarding the 28 employees. Did you think that they thought they were going to get fired? Right? What do you think they were thinking here in this regard? And then also your reaction to Google firing them, given the facts of the case.
Not surprised at all. Expected. First of all, I want to say salute to all the guys on the panel, LAR and Ike and all of them, man. How you guys doing? Hopefully all is well.
It was good, fam.
It's great to hear from you, man. Great to hear. Yeah, but just holding it on. I'm in the corporate environment here. Here in America, as we know, and let's be very frank, as far as the corporate environment is concerned, we're also talking about billions of dollars of contracts. You're getting in the way of that, protesting that, you're going to have a problem. So yeah, that was going to be an issue. Not surprised whatsoever. My nephew works at a very prestigious law firm in the city, and he's a young attorney, and he's making a lot of money, and he has to be very careful about what he had to say about the whole Israel Palestinian situation. He had to kind of keep his mouth kind of mum on that as well, and yet he saw the hypocrisy there. A lot of the major how would I say partners there were Jewish, and
so how do you? I just want to ask how you square that in your mind. Like, do you just say, okay, well, and I'm asking now with regards to quote unquote free speech and things like that. Now,
I think free speech in this country, you have the right, but depending if you're working for a corporation and whatever, free speech is going to come at a cost. So it all depends on what you're doing. You have a job and you're building a house, your free speech is going to be curtailed because you're not going to want to get in the way of that. If you've got millions of dollars and you're free to say whatever you want, then you're more free. That's really what this comes down to. So free speech comes at a cost. Free speech has never been free. So that's something that we have to thoroughly understand. And certainly if you're going to be in the corporate environment and working with many of the tribesmen, you're going to be dealing with curtailing some of your speech. And that's just not for Black, that's for others as well. So people have to kind of toe the line there. Because at the end of the day, it is politics, certainly. There's a lot of money involved. And if you're not in a position to deal with, if you're not in that dollar, in that dollar path, you're going to have a problem. So
if you're not in the, these are problems. Yeah, if you're not in the tax bracket, these are different tax brackets.
There's going to be certain issues. That's the hardcore reality of that. As far as the hypocrisy and all of that is involved, this is quite obvious. Even the racism that's involved as well. But that depending on where you are in that situation is all subject to the dollars and where you're at. So it's unfortunate to put it in those terms, but that is about as real as I see it. But how do I see it? It's hypocritical. It's ridiculous. But this is what the realities are on the ground.
Gotcha. So Kaizo, I want to get your reaction. Let me just read a little bit of this. It says the video of them, you're right. This is the article regarding the protest and the firing. Video of the demonstration shared on social media showed police arresting employees in the office of Google Cloud CEO Thomas Kirkland, whatever, right? Uh, in a statement on Thursday, Google said that physically impeding employees, preventing them from accessing company facilities, was a clear violation. In other words, they went a little bit far in terms of their cosplay here. Um, what did they live action role playing, right? LARPing, right? You can't be blocking people. You're not built for that, right? You shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. But Kaiser, what are your reactions? Your initial reactions here? Do you think they expected to be fired, and was it right that they were fired?
Okay, I mean, okay. I'll say that I don't think they did anything primarily wrong. From what I read in the article, No Tech for Apartheid organized a sit-in, right? People have done this for all the time. Black Americans have done it many times, and I think the issue here isn't really what they did. Google will say what they did. They disrupted the flow of work, etc., which is all true. I think the main issue here is not what they did or even how they did it. I think Google needs to know who its ops are, right? At the end of the day, these people can't be trusted, especially if some of them were working in some more sensitive areas of development, right? These are the kinds of people who would go and forego any sort of contract of non-disclosure agreement to their competitors, or just giving out tech to anybody else. So I think the firing was actually more strategic than just Google being angry that these people did something that Google didn't like.
You know what? And just as you say that, and please, just wanted to put this in here regarding it being strategic for Google, right? Google has not really been, done much of the layoffs or participated in much of the layoffs that we kind of saw recently. Ahead of the line is Elon Musk at Twitter with 85% or whatever, and then Meta did its thing. And so when they're trimming the fat like that, obviously the employees are going to be a little bit more like, okay, let me hold my cool, like Nagone mentioned about his relative. So, however, Google doesn't really have any reason to keep these people. In other words, the money flows are not so flowy right now, right? Things are tight, generally speaking. That's why all these other people are laying off. And this is the wrong time, right? This is the wrong market for you to be doing this kind of crap. Like Google has been the most lenient. I mean, we can see, we know about Google and their history and how they are, and their AI that refuses to draw white people and stuff. But they've generally been the most lenient. So, but this is the wrong time to be doing this kind of stuff. Definitely, this is like a great excuse for them to just get rid of these people.
Yeah.
Again, strategic. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly, right. So they played right into Google's hands, and Google decided, like, okay, we don't really want these kinds of people because we can't trust them long term. And this is great, exposing us and making it really easy. Oh, okay, we want to downsize a little bit. This gives us the moral advantage, and they can't even get sued, or they don't even have to give severance, really, packages, at least not ones that leave them under some form of extortion. So yeah, I think this is great for Google in that regard. Now, regarding the protest and what they stand for, it's kind of insane a little bit, right? Google simply provides services to everyone in almost all countries. Cloud data storage, it's needed, right? So at the end of the day, it's kind of almost juvenile that the complaints that they're having. It's not like Google is, they're not accusing Google of providing tech.
Again, sorry for interjecting these. Sorry. Let my throat there. But yeah, sorry for interjecting these little NI points there. But I just wanted to say that regarding protesting companies, insofar as they're helping the, shall we say, military industrial complex and wars and stuff, like, I think that a priori you can say with regards to certain companies, they only benefit when there is hot war, generally speaking, right? Like you're making these rockets and these missiles and certain types of drones and all this, such and such and such, right? Ballistic and anti-ballistic, whatever. That kind of thing, if you're in that business, Kaizo, and your P&L depends on that, and next quarter is looking rough, you're hoping for some more rockets to get fired, right? So you find yourself in a position where people are incentivized to hope for war. So all I'm saying is basically it makes sense to kind of block those people, like, and say, hey, I'm anti the military industrial complex with regards to these particular companies and their particular machinations, and they're always, because their whole incentive is to be hoping for war. But if somebody, as you're saying, is giving general services, cloud computing, whatever, storage, all this kind of stuff, AI and data center type stuff to everybody, then it's not like they're not missiles, right? And stuff like that.
Yeah.
But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't want to go in and be very specific, but I mean, Israel has schools, right? There are people that live in that country, and they have to, basically function. So I think it's a little bit juvenile and a little bit undercooked. Some of the protest points. If they said Google is utilizing specific AI and selling it to Israel as part of some kind of defense or military, information services, intelligence services, so that they can use it in drones. And these drones, of course, are not just there for farming requirements, then you can make an argument. And again, I don't agree with the argument, but the argument can stand. But at the moment, I think it's just juvenile. And so what happened. They got fired. And I think the question that most people want to know is how many of these Gen Z millennials are going to lose their jobs before they realize,
Yeah. These are not the times to be losing certain cushy flows, right? Flow is important. Cash flow is super important in times where cash is tight, and to be losing the very good cash flow called a job. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, before I get into the next aspect of this same topic here, because I want to ask about something that Kaizo perhaps just kind of alluded to, the effectiveness of their protest, right? And also generally your stance in terms of what they're saying. I know Kai's already said a couple of things, but I want to play this little clip here of what's going on with the protests. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Click that like button, share button. Here we go.
We should speak out about this genocide constantly, especially here at Google, where they're making billion-dollar contracts with the genocidal IOF. Google, you can't hide! You're covering a genocide!
The Google offices in New York City, where tech workers with No Tech for Apartheid are taking part in a day of action to demand that Google and Amazon cut all its ties with Israel, including the contract known as Project Nimbus, where these tech companies are providing state-of-the-art technology that is intensifying Israel's apartheid and genocide against Palestinians. Inside of Google's offices, Google workers have staged a sit-in of the 10th floor, and workers are rallying behind me outside to show their support. The Google workers on 10th protested an hours before Google called the cops to arrest. Occupying the office of Google Cloud CEO Thomas Kurian got arrested while live streaming. 9 workers were immediately charged with trespassing and placed on administrative leave.
Arrested while live streaming. That's a very 2024 statement right there.
And the next day, Google fired 28 workers in retaliation for protesting. Google has been punishing workers who dare to speak up against Google's ties to Israel.
I'm also here. I was hired about a month ago.
This is Eddie Hatfield. He lost his job last month after disrupting an Israeli tech conference that Google sponsored.
Builds technology that powers genocide.
I gotta push the guy.
Google's name all over the walls of that room while speakers come up and use genocidal, violent language to refer to Palestinians. That room is a place where they're making decisions about how this technology gets used, but not everyone who's affected by those decisions gets to have a voice in that room. That being the people being bombed by AI systems in Gaza, people moving between checkpoints in the West Bank and beyond when this technology.
LAR, are they convincing you, or are they just annoying you? Right? Are these the people blocking the streets? Right? You agree with them, they're protesting something, but then they block your street. Now you can't go pick up your kid from school and stuff like that. Now you're pissed. You don't like their attitude. You don't like their face. Right? Or are they helping here? What are your general thoughts about the cause they're protesting and their particular tactics and its effectiveness, if you will?
I don't have an issue with people protesting. I just have an issue with people who pick and choose when something is right and wrong. And okay, so they feel like Israel's wrong. Okay, you protesting. But did you protest for DEI? No, you didn't. Matter of fact, since you want to, with Google using their technology to to oppress somebody. I'm sure Google works with France. Do you have any issue about what France is doing to Africa using Google technology? Absolutely not. So this is where this stuff becomes an issue. You know, all these white people covering their faces as if like it's still a pandemic, and they putting their names out here to fire them. If you really want to be honest, just boy, I'm about to be trifling when I say this. Just admit that you had a pretty cushy life and you're trying to make up a struggle to make yourself feel better. You're no different than one of them white teachers who worked in the hood in the 80s and 90s to make it look good on their resume. So, you know, but my issue at the end of the day is I don't think these people actually care that much.
So, luxury belief, putting things out there and making certain statements, sometimes called virtue signaling, things that you don't really, it doesn't have any cost, you don't bear any cost, right? You're not really there fighting or not, and you pick and choose. You sell to France, you know, you don't mind you don't mind what the Chinese may be doing to certain aspects, blah, 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 those kinds of things. But
let me
right?
Let me say something.
Go ahead.
Real quick. And I should have said this earlier, my bad. At the end of the day, America and white America has a really bad issue with saying they're speaking up and standing up and protesting something. And then when the next news cycle hits, they forget it for the rest of their lives.
Another great point. Nagone.
Yeah.
Another little skirmish. People are going to forget about it. LAR is pointing out inconsistency in certain things. We're talking about the effectiveness, right? Are they being effective? Are they being disingenuous? Is this just kind of little bratty kids spouting out luxury beliefs in order to make themselves feel good and, you know, have a little struggle in their life, if you will? Are they convincing you? And what tactics would you recommend if you really were trying to stop, you know, a particular entity in the world that you thought was doing something wrong?
Well, you know, you're going to have to move politically. You're going to have to certainly move with social unrest, and you're going to have to also show some of that also at the ballot box as well. So, certainly, you know, getting out there and making we're speaking specifically to this issue, making a ruckus and being out there and having the press cover what you're saying and putting heat on you know, on a company or so forth, certainly as time goes on can play effectively, and we have seen this type of thing in the past. So do I really hold it against these people standing up and protesting, like we have people in New York City who were protesting against this as well, and others? No, I certainly don't see a problem with it. You know, me right now trying to attach that to other causes specifically for Black people, we can certainly get into that in greater detail. But as of here, as this issue here specifically is concerned, you know, you have to get out there and protest openly, and if there's candidates and so forth who sponsor this and you want to speak against that, you can use your vote against them as well. So there are quite a few ways of doing that. Violence and so forth being pushed forth gets a lot of attention, but a lot of times it brings a little bit more negative attention towards you. So you might want to tend to avoid that a little bit more. But when we tended to look in the 60s and when we looked at a lot of our protests, George Floyd and everything else like that we saw happen, people got out there in the streets and started rumbling, and you know, and the whole Black Lives Matter thing and all that. It was very effective, and we see some levels of resentment in our society and culture today because of the effectiveness of those types of movements and demonstrations. So and we had some ability to change some effects, literally with your legal system as well. So yes, they're on the right track with respect to doing a lot of social unrest if they can and broaden it. The more young white people you have getting involved in this brings a lot more attention to it as well. So certainly people will look at that a lot more as well. It's just where we are with respect to this country, and why I bring that up is during the '60s when we had the civil rights movement, and we looked at Keener, Goodman, and Schwerner, who were killed in the in in the freedom rides and so forth. But when those two white Jewish kids were killed and found buried with a young black man under a dam in Alabama, and we saw that, that put a lot more heat on the movement, and a lot more people got involved, and so on and so forth. So these things do play a role. I mean, they do, looking at things realistically and how things kind of work on the ground. That's what we have seen. So, do I think this movement is effective? I think it'll have some if they can get it larger, certainly. But this is your way to protest, really, in a more legitimate way that I think people can certainly accept and grasp onto. You start getting a lot more violent and doing a lot more things, then it'll how would I say, polarize people a bit more. But yeah, you have a right to protest. So this is one of the ways that they're doing it, and I personally don't really have a serious issue with that at all at this stage.
Makes sense. Makes sense. You got to move politically. You mentioned, right? You have to back it up by, for example, providing support to those politicians, congressmen, or whomever who may be backing and sponsoring these types of things. You might bring some of your issues and kind of inject your issues in there and go in there with your program, right?
Yes.
Scratch my back, I scratch your back, that kind of a situation, which is the way in which things get done. I don't know if you wanted to emphasize that point, just like a side point, generally speaking, regarding the fact that in a democracy, generally speaking, especially if we're talking about black men, for example, we're talking about minorities, generally speaking, then there is no way in most, even if you get something special every once in a while, you have to expect that most of your political dealings with regards to your strivings and getting what you want is going to be with other people under umbrellas and whatnot. I know you know what I'm saying. Go if you want to
Yeah,
just go ahead.
what in essence you're really speaking about is coalition building and working with coalitions with others. Very important. That must be done. The more people you have pulling onto your side, the better your chances become. And that is just the factor of human nature. That's how things work, and that's what you want to do. You want to pull as many people as you can in on your side as possible. That's certainly what the opposition will do. So that's the game that you have to play, and that's what some of these folks are doing out there right now, and that's that's moving in the right direction.
Gotcha. So Kaizo, right? So this guy that I'm about to play here.
In retaliation for protesting. Google has been punishing workers who dare to speak up against Google's ties to Israel.
I'm also here. I was fired about a month ago.
This is Eddie Hatfield. He lost his job last month after disrupting an Israeli tech conference at Google sponsor.
And I refuse to build technology that powers genocide, apartheid.
So what do you think of Eddie here, Kaizo? Is this one of your? Would you hang out with Eddie? Or is Eddie annoying you?
I guess I'd have to get to know him spiritually. I would really need to know his motivations, right? What he's like, why he's doing this. Eddie to me
if he
actually
just decided to troll and was like, you know what,
Yeah,
these guys
he might be
are
trolling,
doing some weird stuff and genocidal, blah blah blah, and this and that sucks, and F this, I'm gonna do this. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, it might be trolling, and this guy looks like one of those guys who sits in a basement somewhere. He's got a little bit on the spectrum, so I'm not too sure what I think of him, but I'll say this. I'll say this guy obviously is going to build his portfolio now, right? Because, his name's going to be out there, his YouTube channel, whatever it is that people use, his GitHub, is going to definitely be hitting on things. So when it comes to like ethical coding and all that kind of stuff, there's some companies that will pick someone like this up because he's kind of standing up and being the voice of the movement. So, I think he will be fine, right? It's the other ones who are just sitting there with unmemorable faces. All those Chinese, Google, I'm not saying Chinese people don't have memorable faces, right? But I think they're the ones who are going to suffer the most. The question here I have for you, Ike, though, is something that LAR actually briefly mentioned And I think spiritually is where I don't really agree with these people. If you really care about human beings being sort of mistreated by large corporations, why don't you go to the source, right? Go and start protesting the prices of Tesla, the prices of iPhones, and ask for a 10x increase. So because these kids are being made to go
Yep.
illegally mine cobalt and coltan. Like, go to the source, right? Like, at the end of the day, these are very contrived examples which are there to fulfill their egos. So I'm not really in it with them at all. And I know this because if you spoke to them, they would not go there with you, right? That's now the issue. They would find some excuse to remove themselves from that whole picture. So yeah, I spiritually, no, they're not making sense, right? They're not going to the source. So I think that's the main thing that I have that I don't I agree with.
Yes. Very well put there. Um, Immigration is one thing. Another thing is kind of the global capital finding labor wherever it finds it, right? Outsourcing, they used to call it back in the day when they just first came out, right? Um, so that is a way to hide a lot of your quote unquote inflation, or the fact that you know your way of living is not as sustainable as it might be. But anyways, let me just read something that Google's response here, right? Google also denied that the contract was related to weapons or intelligence, right? It's like it's not weapons or intelligence. We're just doing some contract for the Israeli government, might be for their schools or some other kind of bureaucratic, whatever, who knows. But in a blog post, Google CEO Sundar Pichai issued a veiled warning to protesting employees. A veiled warning. Okay, the guy's pretty soft. So let's see. What did he say? He said, "We have a culture of vibrant, open discussion that enables us to create amazing products and turn great ideas into action." Okay, well, so far, nice boilerplate corporate speak. That's important to preserve. It's important to preserve that. But ultimately, we are a workplace and our policies and expectations are clear. This is a business and not a place to act in a way that disrupts coworkers, makes them feel unsafe, to attempt to use company as a personal platform and all that other kind of stuff, or to fight over disruptive issues or debate politics, right? So I think, yeah, he did come landing uh, harshly there. But ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna move on here. We've addressed several aspects of this particular thing, right? Did they think they were gonna be, their expectations, judging them, even though we're not mind readers and stuff like that? But we're giving probabilities regarding their motivations, the kinds of things that they will go, kinds of places that they will go, and whatnot, with regards to the root issues, right? And then the effectiveness of their tactics, techniques. You know what else is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Inflation remains kind of hot right now. Okay. And one clear evidence of that is that the Fed thought they were going to have several cuts of the interest rates this year, or at least the interest rate that they control, right? They thought they were going to do those cuts. They haven't done that because inflation is coming in hotter. That's just like a little marker regarding the stats and, the printing. But with regards to regular people's lives, right? It is pretty crazy out there, right? And I would like to ask generally, I'm gonna start with Kaizo here, how you're feeling the inflation. I know you feel it differently, perhaps in terms of dollar strength and whatnot, because you're kind of dealing internationally and whatnot. You get paid in dollars, you're spending in Kenyan shillings and all these other kinds of things. But there are TikTok videos out there and more, and we just know the reality of, if you sandwiches are $15 these days, right? Especially in New York, where when Nagone is from, right? It's like ham and cheese is like $35 or something. So it's kind of crazy, and people wages have not caught up with this for decades now. So how are you feeling this inflation, Kaizo? Just to pick on you.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I one area is actually the imported goods that I like to consume. I'm not going to talk about which goods they are, but I do like to consume some imported stuff. I can't do that anymore. Right? I have to drink. Sorry, I have to drink. I have to. I have to consume local water. I can't have imported water anymore, right? That's just an example. When it comes to like prices, because I'm talking from an international sort of perspective. Kenya, fuel prices have gone up by a lot actually. Uber prices have gone up by a lot actually, right? Um, Generally, it's a lot more expensive to do things that I like to do, and I think obviously the government is trying to like keep it down by increases taxes on the rich on certain areas, like importation of cars and putting bans and all those kinds of stuff. Also, electricity prices have gone up, right? And this is obviously related because of all the supply chain that has to be sort of manifested. Generally, I will say from an African perspective, anything related to fuel prices is definitely causing some major issues here. Now, in terms of prices, I used to spend like at least $1,000 a month comfortably. Right now, I'm spending 1,600, and I just don't even know where the money's going. Like it's literally it's kind of crazy. So I will have to redo my economics to actually make sure I don't end up in poverty.
Well, you see, Nagon, you were talking about politics earlier, and this is an election year, and we have inflation that is not going down, and the rate cuts that were anticipated by the market, right? So the recent market rally, it could be said, kind of was part of the anticipated, had the anticipated rate cuts priced in, and we're not seeing them. And people thought we're going to be up to 6 rate cuts of like 0.25% each or something like that. Whatever. Anyways, we're not seeing that. Biden is facing re-election, right? And it's hard for people out there. Now, I know you're out there driving your Ferraris or whatever your preferred kind of fancy car is. Nagon.
Maserati.
Maserati. I know Nagon has a Maserati, by the way. He's out there, tearing people out the frame.
No, I keep it mostly parked. But anyway.
Well, what are your thoughts, and how do you think this will affect? Will play out this election year? No rate cuts, inflation is high. It's hard out there.
Well, I look at things kind of three-dimensionally. What we're really looking at is, I was just in the business that I'm in. I'm looking at the April's jobs report, right? And please let me explain. I'll get into this. We're looking at about 428,000 jobs that were actually created in this market, which remains very vibrant. So we're looking at a 3.6% unemployment rate. And what we're also looking at is 95% of the 22 million jobs that were lost in 2021 due to the COVID crisis. 95% of them have been recovered. So we're dealing with in a very vibrant market. And when we start looking at inflation, we're actually looking at if the economy kind of increases and gets stronger, the rate of economic growth is faster than, let's say, the long trend run rate. If we're looking at it, that will tend to get a little tighter, because we will tend to increase more demand because now all of a sudden we're employing a lot more people, we're buying a lot more supplies and so forth, and just because of our let's say some of the issues with our supply chain and so forth begin to get a little drawn on a little tighter, we the price of things kind of go up because the demand gets higher. So that's kind of what we're really looking at. So what's going on what's going on with Biden and his economy is things are running a little bit too strong on the job market. We got a lot of people being hired. So as we see this increase, that's going to pull on inflation. Now firms push up prices because the demand is growing. We have and then we have a demand for more supplies that begins to shrink a little bit. So we see that. So in the short term, this higher growth is going to lead to certainly lower unemployment and demand for more workers, and we're going to see, rates and these kind of things go up as well as things are pinched a bit more. So what we're going to look for and what we're going to see is we're going to see probably over the rest of this year, not 400,000 jobs, but more like maybe 200,000 and so forth coming in, from the summer months moving into the fall. So things are going to slow down a bit, look a bit more recessionary to slow down this growth. And you're going to have, concomitant rates are going to be able to go down a bit more. Rates are going to start to drop off. The Fed's going
What
to
do you think the
really.
voter cares more about, inflation or unemployment? People,
Uh, 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 uh,
uh,
a-
yeah,
as of right now, the voters right now are saying, "Hey, it's inflation. We're paying a bit more for eggs. We're paying a bit more for this, bit more for that." That's what's really being pushed in the media. Certainly, if jobs were an issue, they'd be screaming about jobs. So whatever people feel at this stage, a bit more they're going to complain about. So jobs are not the issue. The economy is running very strong, and people are feeling a little bit of they're feeling a little bit more of the inflationary pinch because of the strong jobs economy. So that's what
yeah.
people.
So, given a choice, what do you think people would prefer? In other words, like,
I think
because
I
yeah,
think more than anything else, people would prefer to have a job
okay,
than certainly have uh say, well, I got to pay an extra this for eggs or whatever.
yeah,
It's really a job. If you don't have a job, then things could be a little bit lower, but still the wolf is at your door in a big way. So that's really the real deal. People would prefer to have a job and work as opposed to having a little higher inflation. That's really based and concomitant with the higher employment rates
yeah.
that we
If
do.
we take aside the fiscal policy aspects,
Yeah.
let's just say we don't. I mean, we know Corona did happen, and a lot of fiscal policy happened, right? We know that, so we know that's part of this as well. But generally speaking, yes, the growth will kind of, and overheating, if you will, which will lead the interest rates to go up by the Fed to try to cool things down, does go with high rates of employment, if you will,
Yes,
right? Which lowers of unemployment. So, um, one
but
last,
that's
just like one
key.
last,
A reason why I say that's key because people miss that, and I want to make sure that folks understand that connection.
yeah,
So we,
people.
so we
There's
don't.
a
Miss that.
just one last quantitative aspect of this here.
Go ahead.
Politically, so on the individual basis, people will prefer to have a job.
That's correct.
Um, However, some people do, the numbers as to, well, if 5% of people lose their job, right? Then that's just 5%. But if everybody is feeling, but everybody feels inflation. In other words, like, I have especially from a class basis, I have this wide swath of particular class where everyone is feeling inflation as opposed to 5% lost their job. But that's just like a thought about, like, okay, well, it won't, if I'm a politician, maybe it won't really affect me that much if 5% lose their job. But if everybody's feeling the inflation, maybe they don't really like me that much. But that's just a point there, not really making one way or the other judgment regarding it, right? But I don't know. Do you want to land the plane regarding just this aspect here of Biden, inflation, and how it's going to affect the vote?
What do I think?
Yeah, just you made
I
it
I
clear.
I
Just
I,
want to land your plane.
I think people will lay more right now on the jobs. They're going to look more at economy. Is the economy strong? Are people able to go out and work and at least buy the basics? Are they able to do that? Because when people are sitting home and are not working, they have a real problem. And what we've seen historically, and I'm just going with the historical numbers, historically as presidents over the last 120 years that I'm looking at following this, presidents who have good economies get reelected. Even if they're very close, they tend to get reelected. And so if I am a betting man, I'm going to bet on that. And the numbers are starting to be this slowly creeping up and showing that that's starting to become the case.
All right, all right, all right, ladies and gentlemen. Let me read a little bit about this LAR because I want to see what your take on this The $15 sandwich I mentioned earlier is something I noticed recently where, the sandwich, the coffee, the things that, you're in the airport, you just buy it, you don't really think too much about it. And then lately you start looking at your receipts and you're like, whoa, this is not what I recall paying. But I'm reading something here from the Harvard Gazette, right? It says recent polls show most Americans feel the US economy is in a tough shape and getting worse, right? Getting in the worst one. 76% rated economic conditions in the US negatively, while 74% said rising food prices were having the greatest impact on their finances. Rising food prices, okay? According to a new poll from Financial Times, University of Michigan. So, LAR, you seeing these food prices? How are things going out there in Texas? Food, real estate, services. You still getting Uber Eats, or that's too rich for your blood these days? Are you muted or absent?
Yeah, you muted.
I think maybe LAR is not with us.
I think he's muted.
Yeah, he is muted, but I don't know if he heard what we're saying or or he had to go pick up his Uber Eats from the door. Well, so
Well, you can still afford it.
so, guys, I want to ask you something before LAR comes back regarding like the feasibility of family formation, right? Because this is an issue. Okay, we're talking about drizzle, and all that other kind of stuff. Basically, saying that the economic conditions are such that for the average earner, a little bit over the average earner, one standard deviation away, that kind of a thing, are not able to actually start families in any kind of a meaningful way that's not super economically stressed, right? Home, high interest rates and high home costs with their rather meager salaries and whatnot is making it such that so basically, are we seeing the depopulation and the death of the West? Um, is it all finally coming together?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I think when we say the West, I'm going to include some Eastern countries there, like South Korea, Japan. Um, since culturally they're actually very similar, in certain, especially the economic sort of promises that people had in different generations. I actually do believe, right, especially since COVID situation with the dampening of economics, a lot of small businesses died. Sure, a lot of the big and middle businesses kind of were able to recuperate, but a lot of the small ones died. Right? Imagine you're producing a very specific artisan product, like some kind of shoe or ink from some prefecture in Japan or something, right? Um, by having to lay off people, you actually laid off your talent. So recuperating might be more difficult than a company that kind of provides more generic services, or at least which is more integrated in the market. Anyways, so what I've seen or across the West, right? I'm talking about Germany, Norway, and all these Scandinavian countries, as well as East Asia, South Korea, Japan, is that there has been a large shift in the population. These countries, some of them are having 1.5 children per woman. That is way below replacement level of 2.2 children per woman, right? So clearly, these economies are going to keep struggling, especially when you can't fulfill tax burdens to pay off for social security. I'm talking about older people or any other source of social securities, right? So I think with the dampening economy, we are definitely seeing a new movement from two sides, right? We're seeing the sprinkle movement, which has been here for a while, right? This is the women telling women that, hey, look, if he's not rich, just don't bother with him. Fair enough, but there's almost no rich men, which of course will lead to women dating the same man, of course, and then complaining that they're having multiple children. They're having a man cheating on them, who have multiple baby mamas, right? Because you're all with the same man. Now, however, though, the men are kind of interesting, right? They're entering the soft boy era. They've created anti-movement on the drizzle movement, right? And I actually think one reason why this thing is hitting right now, it's not by accident. right? I do believe there is, a feeling by some people that is definitely correlated, at least to some extent, with the economics of what's really going on, around the world, right? Because as you mentioned, in most economies, especially the West,
I mean, you literally just said, okay, family formation, which we know is highly economic. And you talk about mate selection, and you based it on money and availability of the moneyed men, if you will. And then you say, it's possibly, maybe has a correlation to the economy.
right, it's because Game Changer
I would
came up,
say
right?
that
And
I would say just
that's
stick
why.
with
So I had
say
to
it
be
with
very
chest that
careful with
you're
my terms.
basically saying it is the economy.
Right. But I don't want to get accused by another logical person, right, of making any logical errors. But I definitely it's related. I think it's 100% related.
Yeah,
I'll
just
backtrack
a
now.
word on just a quick NITE there on the demographic aspect, because demographics say a lot, right? Because generally speaking, the age of a population, right? The average age of a population. Well, why does it matter economically? Well, you just look at the individual life, right? Economically, in your 20s, you have your many years ahead of you, many productive years. You can kind of borrow against those years, right? You can take risks literally in markets and in careers and in all kinds of ways, right? And this leads to growth, such that by your 40s, 45, you're now seeing exponential growth, blah, blah, blah. But then it's going to sunset at some point, and then you're just going to be Medicare bills and hospice care, and you're not buying apartments or taking new loans to start new businesses and stuff like that. So this would be reflected in the population. If the population is generally old, things tend to generally slow down. However, there is kind of like a pushback with regards to the baby boomers in the United States. Specifically, some people have postulated that they will actually spend a lot. They're the richest freaking generation of people that ever existed on Earth, and that the pattern of their spending will definitely change, but it'll still be a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. But I'll let you go ahead and land. And again, what we're talking about here is inflation. We're talking about inflation. We talked with Nicole already about the shall we say, the impact on the election and whatnot. Inflation, high interest rates, difficulty in family formation, and all these other kinds of things that are correlated in there. But Kaiser, go ahead and land the plane, and we'll see. We just got joined by Game Changer.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe the manosphere doesn't like to talk about it too much, but economics really is the biggest reason for whether families succeed or they fail. All these things about culture, yeah, it's fine, but you reach a point where you realize, even if you pick someone who's not ratchet, someone from a so-called good family, now the economics take place even more importance in those sort of formations, right? To secure like obedience, right, from any sort of source, economics is definitely important. And that's the reality.
Yeah, and economics is relative, which is the interesting thing, right? It's in other words, what you're talking about, the economic kind of perspective or the perceptions of the people are relative in several regards. For example, like somebody in Africa would say, well, all you people in America are rich, and the person in the hood that they're calling rich because they have a refrigerator and a microwave and a cell phone are like, what are you talking about? I'm not rich. Look at this other guy over here. That's one way in which it is relative, but it's also relative in all kinds of in ways that people's expectations change. In other words, maybe people's minds are warped by social media, right? Such that now their economic reality is such that they deserve billions and they're not seeing billions. And if they're not going to settle for anything but billions. Right? So I just wanted to add that aspect in there. But Game Changer, how's your microphone? But let me just check that first. And
Testing.
Testing. Good. LAR, are you back?
He's still trying to get Uber Eats to work. It's gone off budget.
Yeah, the card got declined. He's scrambling for the other card. He's going to use that third debit card from the credit union that he has, just like a $350 that he just had for like a while ago. And yeah, it's going down the rabbit hole of cards. Anyways, Game Changer.
He doesn't refinance his house, but yeah.
I don't know if you've listened to different parts of the conversation we've been having, or if you had something that you wanted to start with, and you feel free to go ahead and start with that.
Sure.
We've talked about a couple of things.
When I came in, Kaiser was speaking on the relationship between economics and family formations and relationships.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do have to respectfully disagree with Kaizo when he states that it is not.
Why you got to be so predictable, Game Changer?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, Kaizo and I are going to disagree on a lot of things because I think it's just rooted in fundamental ideals. So, and that's okay. You know, it's good to have some healthy disagreements. Wouldn't you agree, Kaizo?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So, but no, I do respectfully disagree with the problem being not cultural, but a matter of economics. You see, there are poorer cultures who still produce and maintain and sustain healthy families. You know, a lot of people come here, first generation immigrants, with absolutely nothing but family, and they sustain that family structure for generations, at least 3 generations, from what I've noticed. It's and actually, when you know the average, even if you calculate for inflation, income for an African American household was lower, and you know education and things like that were less, the families were stronger then. So it's really a matter of culture, and this culture really has a mandate that requires higher luxury spending than anything else. So and you're not going to get a person like that to conform to a family structure. I know there's a sentiment out there like, you know, you can seduce a woman with such overwhelming economic and luxury goods that she will have no choice but to submit to you. However, we live in a society where a woman can have your wealth without actually submitting to you through a process called divorce or child support or alimony, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. She don't necessarily have to sustain a family structure in order to have access to your wealth, if that is her intention. So the whole trying to buy submission from a woman doesn't work, not here in the States. Also, it was something that you were saying about the sprinkle sprinkle versus the drizzle drizzle thing, which you know I do agree with a lot of what you were saying there. The interesting thing about this inflation, you know, economic decline, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is that women are becoming more demanding. Now, logic would dictate that they would become less demanding because you know the need is greater, but they're not. You know, when the economy was good, they demanded that a guy makes, I don't know, a certain amount. Now that the economy is bad, they're demanding that a guy makes twice that amount, all for more luxury goods. Now, my hypothesis is that the reason that they are demanding more is because, and this is another thing that really just strips the relationship between economics and family formation, is that we reward poverty here in the U.S., meaning that, you know, no matter a person who is poor is actually more likely to survive than a person who is not poor because the government subsidized their poverty. Meaning that a person who is working at jobs like Walmart or something like that sporadically, you know, or seasonally, they work during the Christmas season and then they no longer need your help as much, you know, or something like that, you know, but they're struggling to pay bills all the time, is actually in a worse off situation than a person who's just not working at all and receiving some type of government subsidy. Now, the women understanding this knows that, you know, okay, it is going to take an extraordinary amount to take me out the government safety net. And that's essentially what you're paying for. But once again, it doesn't secure the relationship. So I think that that's why we have this divergence in how things is going in that regard.
Makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. Yes. So a confluence of issues there. You know, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic. It's a mixture there, and with a certain amount of policies. It's not just an economic thing purely. Now, LAR, you say you're back, right?
Yeah, I'm back. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, cool. No problem. So we were just getting into this inflation aspect, right? We heard from Nagon regarding its correlation with high employment rates, right? Employment is not coming down. The economy is running hot, a little too hot, which tend to what we call inflation. Reasons for it are, you can have several reasons for it, but it's going to affect the election. Someone's going to get blamed one way or the other. We've also heard about how it is a big aspect of, or is affecting family formation and also the demographics of a society. reducing birth rates to below replacement and whatnot. But I wanted to ask you, regarding the inflation specifically, and the food inflation and things of that nature, where are you seeing it recently? I gave an example of me seeing it in some things that you didn't used to look at the receipt for, and then you start looking at it and you're like, these little things, coffee at the airport costs ridiculous amounts of money and whatnot. What are your general reactions here regarding inflation and the view that many Americans have? 74% of them say things are bad and they're getting worse.
For me, the worst sign is car insurance. Because you don't like, how can inflation affect car insurance? It's not like it's not a good, a service that needs gas to get to you. You get what I'm saying? But I live in probably the place with the highest car insurance in the nation. So that's where where I see it. Like the things that oh, you trying to tell me the medical insurance went up because of inflation? Okay, is life insurance going up because of inflation now? Like things that aren't like food.
You know what I heard recently, LAR, and I'm sorry,
No,
regarding the car insurance one. It was interesting. So the pandemic happened, right? Pandemic happened, cars left the road. You would think, oh, no cars, no accidents, so the insurance will stay where it's at. Now, insurance prices, generally speaking, especially car insurance price, because it's mandated, are regulated. Their profits are regulated by the government, right? So they're allowed to make a certain percentage of just a little bit, like 5% extra profit on the insurance charge, and then they can make the rest by investing the money, which is basically what insurance companies do. They're banks, right? But they said that the actual rate of accidents went up. So it was, was the crazy people not wearing masks and being rednecks that apparently were driving only, and the thing shot up, and then they started becoming unprofitable. But anyways, I'm sorry, I just heard something about that recently regarding the increase in car insurance. But go ahead.
No, I get that. Because if you get on Instagram, you can see people just driving into everybody, just for no reason whatsoever. But usually those people lose their licenses and this, that, and the third. But the other thing, I back up a little bit about inflation is in people's effectiveness to like the family and all that other stuff. I think the birth rate is probably lower than it was in the Great Depression right now. And the reason I'm saying that and putting it to inflation is because one thing that we don't talk about is, are the prices going up? Yes, but our selfishness went up also. Our entitlement went up also. So, inflation can be a problem, and it is a problem. And it becomes an exorbitant problem when you feel like you need to live a certain way and have certain things and eat a certain type of dish and drink a certain type of drink. So now, to me, that's where it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Because if you want to beat inflation, you better start, getting some knockoff products. The skills that you need to do to lower inflation, it seems like Americans don't want to do it. We're cooking less. We're fixing our own vehicles and homes and apartments less. We're not taking care of ourselves to not wind up in the hospital as much less. It's like what we're basically doing is saying, oh, inflation is high, so I'm gonna be as reckless as possible. And thus you see that with the overspending of America. Sometimes you say people can't afford their lifestyle, because of whatever's going on. But we don't add into the fact that people are overspending on purpose too. They're overspending on purpose and winding up in the hole. Just like people told you back in the day, listen, man, if you're gonna go to school and get an education, you better get it in a reasonable subject. But no, we skip the fact that a lot of people who went to college and have college debt, we skip how many people said they were having a good time, they were having fun. They'll worry about the money part later. And now they're upset. Now they're crying about it. And instead of saying, no, we told you 20 years ago, we told you 10 years ago to stop that, but you wanted to do what you wanted to do. Same thing with credit cards. When people say, "Hey, I wouldn't be getting those credit cards and maxing them out if I was you." No, I want to do what I want to do. Okay. The same thing about people in their knucklehead way of wanting to be renters, and they just want to leave and come and go as they please and wind up getting evicted and leaving leases, and now they can't get an apartment. It's that over and over and over again that has made inflation worse on people. So I'm gonna leave it at that.
Very excuse me. Ladies and gentlemen, let me go ahead and give a shout out here real quick to the super chat. All right. Shout out to the super chat. Dotty gal, them living at a $20. Very, very much appreciated. She says blessings to Ike and guests. Shout out to Spiritual Logic. Shout out to the lead attorney. Shout out to the chat. Go ahead and click that like button and share the stream. And Dr. Thunder, can you hear us?
Yes. Yes. What's happening?
You know what? Let me just ask you real quick, right? And if I may be pardoned here, to go back regarding the 28 employees of Google that got fired, right? Have you heard about that, Dr. Thunder?
Yeah, I heard about it, but I haven't really been paying close attention. Not over the
Okay.
last couple of weeks.
Okay, cool. But let's go to on this front, right? On the inflation front, there's several things that you can comment on that have already been mentioned, right? There's the aspect of how it will affect the elections, right? Inflation is high. The interest rates, which were anticipated, the interest rate cuts, which were anticipated by the markets and such, seem to not be happening because inflation is still remaining high. The economy is running a little hot. Employment needs to actually come down a little bit. Unemployment needs to rise a little bit for the inflation to start receding. Anyways, right? That's generally how it goes, right? And then we talk about the difficulty of family formation and the fact that it is economically unfeasible for a lot of people earning way above the average income to actually form families. And the YOLO spending is something that LAR mentioned, but there is such a thing whereby if you know you can't buy a house, right? Because look at these interest rates and look at the cost of house, then you just buy a Rolex. Okay, people actually do that, right? And when I mention it, it makes sense. Like that psychologically, you're like, I'm not affording the house, so I'm gonna have crazy dinners every weekend and just buy expensive champagne. After all, I would never be able to afford a house. What's the point of saving this money, right? But Dr. Thunder, inflation being high from an economic point of view, in other words, from an election point of view, from a point of view of family formation, or whatever else you want to comment on, given what you've heard so far. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah, everything sort of begins with, uh, I mean, it really begins with the family, right? Because the family is the structure designated and designed to reproduce. Reproducing is necessary because people don't live forever, so they must um, continue to populate the earth, right? You need numbers to pay taxes. You need numbers to it used to be that the health insurance, the original health insurance or life insurance plan, or retirement plan was children. You have children, you pour into your children. The children, um, if they've been taught well, they are able to increase on what it is that you gave them, and there's residual left over to take care of you. That's how this thing was. You know, I mean, that's the only way that it can work. Now, so simultaneously as the family structure is under assault, um, it is, declining in we're declining in birth rate, we're declining in successful marriages, we're declining in um, all of these metrics, and the legal system makes marriage punitive. You know, you get married. She decides that she wants to do whatever. You're going to be left holding the bag. So there's less reasons for men to want to get married. But meanwhile, Pookie is still, reproducing like crazy. But Pookie's offspring are not responsible members of society, and they'll be more of a drain on society than a plus. So you have the breakdown of that, and you can't bet on the future, but we still bet on the future. We continue to bet on the future, but the future, we know what the future is going to be. It's going to be less kids. It's going to be even more volatile. Although I do think that this whole empowerment propaganda has sort of almost come to a peak of its sort of utter destruction. Yeah, I think it will get worse before it gets any better. Um, so there's not really anything that you can do, and then everybody is running around talking about what they deserve. I deserve this, and I deserve that, and they haven't done anything. Generations past, you didn't hear a bunch of people running around talking about, how much they deserve and they deserve that, especially if they hadn't done anything, right? So that sort of leads to this sort of entitlement that LAR was talking about, where though the economy sucks, and what you should do is you should tighten your belt, but people don't tighten their belt because they deserve this and they deserve that, right? And these banks are willing to give people money. Um, you know, you can still borrow money, a high interest rate. You're still betting on the future, but there is no future because you're not even procreating. And if you are procreating, it's you know, it's not a help. It's not an asset. So
Hmm.
so
It
yeah,
is
I
true.
mean, yeah, there's not really anything that you can do with this sort of decentering the family, decentering men, decentering the structure. Um, you decenter that, nothing else can exist. This thing. Look, the first mandate in the Bible is to be fruitful and multiply, and everything. So first of all, it says be fruitful. So in other words, you need to have something that you can offer. You need to be able to sustain a family before you reproduce. So it says be fruitful, then multiply, right? And then everything else, all blessings to follow, are all based on and are all for the purpose of uh, blessing you due to having reproduced. Everything else is because you have reproduced, right? Everything else, it's all. I mean, it's very clear what the issue is. So as reproduction has become under fire, has come under fire, and as you have less people, you have more people uh, engaging in, um, we'll say, uh, what I want to say, sexual liberation and all these other strategies, but they're all sort of neutered because they're not producing children doing it. It's just for pleasure. It's everything has been flipped upside down, and everything that we see, all the dysfunction, especially in the Black community and other places, is first due to those issues. So
Nicely summarized there, Dr. Thunder. Nagone, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about this after you have mentioned before we move to the next topic, but we talked about the election aspect, right? And some economic parameters surrounding the inflation numbers, right? But anything else to add regarding the average Black man out there and his actual economic ability to start a family, right? And what is his future looks like? Go ahead.
Well, for the average Black man out here, if he's got a job and so forth, he can get married if he's saving money. And when I say saving, he's putting money away, in certain kind of accounts, just not in the bank where they can just, hit you with fees and and reduce your savings from there as well. Even though incrementally still, but if he's putting his money in certain kinds of 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 interest bearing accounts where he can kind of make a little bit of money, he can build a family if he plans properly. But one of the big issues that we do have here in the society and in this culture really is a kind of the high divorce rate where you can lose a lot and people are seeing a lot of damage coming through marriages and so forth. So I think the question of the institution itself is under a bit of question at this stage. Even though people are looking to go for the more traditional type of marriage and so forth, and to get a more traditional woman and marry that type of person, if you will, or if you can find that. Still, there are a lot of challenges to a marriage, and you can lose a bit. So brothers, they're having less kids. We see where the numbers are coming from. So black men are having less children. 50 or almost 52, close to 53% of us are not do not have kids. We're looking at 39% and decreasing number of black men getting married. So we have less people getting married, less people having children. So we're definitely seeing that, and looks like black people and those who are getting married are taking a little bit longer in which to get married because of I definitely say because of the ability to save, to buy homes and so forth. At this stage, cost of education is very high, where people cost of, if you're going to get a basic degree or whatever, 29% of us have degrees. It's expensive, over $90,000 and so forth, and just getting an undergraduate education, which is ridiculous. So there are a lot of things out here that are kind of pressing against us in society today. That's really driving it down. We're seeing that as well from other communities too. But speaking specifically for black men, we are postponing certainly marriage. We're definitely having less children, less kids, and and we're looking at some different alternatives. So as far as taxes and these type of things, doing that's more of a kind of a catch-all phrase. It really is where the real benefits for us at this stage. And I think of the younger generation right now are making some decisions. I look at my son; he's doing quite well and he's making some nice dollars. But what is he looking at as far as marriage is concerned? He's a little hesitant. He's certainly trying to keep his money fairly high and not meet a certain type of person where he's not going to lose what he's been working on. And we're seeing a lot more of that going on in our society and culture. So there's some bigger issues that we're going to have to kind of face and deal with on the marriage front for us to really get a little bit more family formation going down at a greater rate. It's reducing in all communities in the West, literally, but certainly as we look at the black community and black men in particular, it certainly is not growing as much. We want to be married, we want to have good relationships, and so forth, but we're finding some issues with that as well. So I'm not going to say it's all just purely economics, of which economics are definitely playing a fairly sizable role as well as it should. But there's some other factors that we have to put in place as well. So I'm just gonna leave it there.
Indeed, 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 ladies and gentlemen. And we're gonna start broaching the last aspect on the docket here, last topic on the docket here. Okay. And that has to do with what do you say? Is it the ad, right? Let's go ahead and add that. Generally speaking, it has to do with taxes, right? It has to do with taxes, it has to do with the tax burden. I don't know how, and I intend to find out how the panel feels regarding the tax burden on them, the bang for their buck. Some things, for example, you can talk about, Scandinavian style societies, right? We're talking about Sweden and Norway and Finland and kind of a social democracy where they have things taken care of and things are nice and easy and smooth, right? And then the typical American pushback is, oh, but that's why you guys pay all those high taxes. But when you actually look at it, you find that the tax rates are kind of similar. Okay. They are. It's not like these guys over there are just paying ridiculous taxes and whatnot. There are other differences regarding the economy and the personalities of the countries that make the economic output different. But it's not because those people are getting taxed to death. That's why they're not as shall we say, efficient or whatever, or produce as much as America. That's not what's going on. America is again taxed to death, but we're not getting the Scandinavian lifestyle, right? So I wanted to highlight a couple of things that recently happened. First of all, the great entertainment one, right? You expense it away, expense entertainment, right? That's been the greatest thing since sliced bread, since forever, since business started, right? Being able to take your clients out. So whether you're working for an organization, right, that gives you some kind of an expense account or something like that, because you're kind of a customer facing person in sales, something like that, you're an account manager, whatever, your company can no longer write off these entertainment expenses. Okay. That is one thing. Okay, that happened earlier, but more recently now, and this one affects more specifically, shall I say, people in the tech industry, right? Because basically now research and development expenditures can no longer be deducted. They allow you to deduct it, but they make you only kind of take out like 20% of it. So you can be a company that makes $1 million, but you pay $1 million in R&D. And what is that? That means your development personnel, right? Let's say software developers and the software that they're using, lab equipment, and certain other things like that. Especially if you're just starting out, right? You're going to be maybe breaking even. So you can be in a situation whereby you're not profitable, but you're still having to pay taxes. But anyways, all that to just kind of start out asking here, Eliar, what do you think about the tax burden in the United States? You heard my kind of like Scandinavian example. Do you think that you're paying your fair share and you're getting your good bang for your buck, or what do you think about the fact that we need so much taxes because perhaps we're spending too much and we have too many high deficits that we're trying to stop people from writing off their write-offables?
I think the rich been getting off. And I'm not talking about like, say, people who make 100,000 or more. I'm talking about like corporations. They've been getting away with murder as far as taxes. I think when you think about some of the richest Americans and some of the richest corporations in America and how I think the majority of them are not even in the country. Like kind of like because in the tax codes in America, you can tell where they're helpful to businesses and where they're not. Like I saw, I think recently on the mansion tax in California, and the mansion tax being a reason why a lot of businesses started leaving California because of the tax was just ridiculous. Whether they had a profit or a loss, they still had to pay out a ridiculous amount, depending, because the mansion tax went from not just mansions, it went to apartment complexes, skyscrapers, all kinds of stuff. So when it comes to the taxes in America, it's a lot of wasted money. It's a lot of wasted money. Like when you say like research and development, at the end of the day, what are the people writing off? Like you got to think about it. When somebody can tell you in America, if you're that rich and you need to save money from paying taxes, if you're super rich, you can buy a plane and write it off and get the money back. You can buy a 6,000 pound vehicle and get half of the money back. And you can't tell a person who's in the lower class, the middle class, even I would say the lower upper class, they can't do that because they don't have the cash to get to pull that stunt off. So ultimately, man, when you look at our society, it's the uber rich corporations who have the cash to buy all these different things to overcharge the working American. So, and I remember how many presidents said they were going to start taxing the rich, and it did in the last 20 years, maybe 30 years, and it didn't really pan out. This is, to me, is an effect of trickle down economics still being a mindset in America. Oh, one other thing. the taxes aren't that much different from the government spending as far as defense spending. It's just a bloated thing that a lot of money gets wasted through. But I'm done.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. So, game changer, right? The state of California, the great state of California. I think they did something whereby, in the peak of zero interest rate policy and kind of a tech growth, they had like over $60 billion surplus, and then they went negative that number only in a few years, right? By doing stupid stuff. Okay. And now we're seeing that, and this is not affecting big businesses. Big businesses who have great balance sheets will be able to pay, we're able to deal with not being able to write off some of this stuff. But we're talking about small business people, right? Now, these people, they might be a corporation. The corporation, you would say, is pulling in like 750,000 or $1 million. But yeah, obviously, that's not its profit. It could be paying that whole amount. It might just be breaking even, in other words, right? Paying for the developers and the this and the that and the whatnot, right? Because you're plowing it all back in. But what are your thoughts regarding the tax burden in California? You getting your bang for your buck? What's up with all this crazy spending? And now they're trying to take away my write-offs.
Okay, so I think one of the key goals of America, in the backbone of its economics, is really not to is to assure that the money keeps circulating. And I think that corporate taxes are necessary in order to do that, as long as the corporations are creating and sustaining employment for others. Then, in return, you can have the kickbacks and things like that a lot of people disapprove of. Take California, for example. You incentivize a tech industry to come to California, with low taxes and the ability to write off certain things that individuals can't in the same way. But as a result, what you do is you allow them the freedom to hire, thousands and thousands of people. Those people in turn pay taxes they pay property taxes, they pay income taxes, and of course they pay sales taxes. And this is something that's good for the area. It's good for the state, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they sacrifice one thing, and that is the corporate taxes, in order to, gain something, and that is the individual taxes from which the corporation employs. So they are allowed to keep the money circulating that way, even if it's not directly taxing the rich corporations. And as we've seen here, by means of California, a lot of companies moved to Texas because, a lot of people thought it was unfair, and they thought it was unfair until they lost their job because, if we don't do it, somebody else will. And that goes on a global scale, even though these companies move to, another state, but that goes on a global scale. If we don't do it, India will. If we don't do it, Nigeria will. And, we don't like them Nigerians. So, we want to make sure that that we properly incentivize the people that employ us and our neighbors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that keep the economy flowing. Now, and the same is with the military spending. Yeah, it is inflated. We would have to go to war with the next 22 countries in order to justify this inflated military budget. However, it does employ a lot of young men. It does put Antoine Fisher to work. This is an establishment that a person can retire early, work hard, start a family, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, by joining the military. And it's and millions of men are doing this. So I wouldn't cut it. Like, if there's a guy working, in the army, manufacturing tanks that we'll never use, I say yes, it is. It does seem like a waste on the surface, but outside of that, he is a working member of the U.S. economy. He is contributing to the U.S. economy through his own taxes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the people that he purchased, say, home, cars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they are also circulating the money as well. So I don't think that we should be so harsh on the people at the top getting the breaks. I do feel that there could be something said that about the people in the middle, because we have right now we kind of like have, as far as quality of life going, we have like a U shape if it was placed on a graph, where people at the absolute bottom, because they are the ones who believe are more likely to spend 100% of their income. So a lot of the provisions is given to those particular people with the understanding that they will circulate it, and they do. But what has happened as a result is quality of life goes to the people at the absolute bottom and the people at the absolute top. And then there's a diminish for the people in the middle. I think something needs to be done about that. And, I don't want to go into it in this show, but that does require a lot of critical thought as to what to do about that.
Yeah, it's rather interesting because the middle, especially given the facts regarding inflation, which we've discussed, right? The middle, with regards to a number associated with that middle, needs to be kind of shifted now, right? In other words, the middle might be this small business person, because one thing about the money a business makes is the whole game is to just, it's like you're trying to hide money from the IRS. It's not a hiding thing, but basically, you need money to be able to uh, progress. So next, you have reoccurring expenses and whatnot, right? So you're projecting into into the future, and you want to have, ideally, people say, have 36 months, at least 18 months of runway, meaning 18 months of expenses, like whatever your average salary you're paying your people are, research and development, whatever your fixed costs and variable costs are, generally average them. You should have 18 months of that in the bank. So, but generally speaking, you make the money, you file it with the IRS, and you're then like, okay, what can I keep their hands away what can I hide in, so it's that it's outside them taxing it, so that I can continue this run. But all that rambling to say that the person who might be starting this company here, and they're starting to get a little bit of success, they make $1 million, but they spent $1 million. In other words, they broke even, and he has some lab stuff and some research developer. He's paying his developers out here in California that money. That is middle class, because it's not like that guy has a whole bunch of money. Out of that $1 million that was written, that he spent, was a salary for himself. It's not going to be anything super crazy until the company starts becoming profitable, in the sense that they have extra after the research and development later. So point is, that middle has shifted a lot upward. But yes, the precarious middle is a different, like the uncanny valley, right? It's just better to be broke and be taken care of, or just be super rich and don't have any problems. But you enter the uncanny valley and getting attacked from both ends. But anyways, let me go to Kaiser real quick, and then Dr. Thunder, regarding yeah, and you can speak about your particular tax situations, right? Because I know you do business you incorporated in England, doing business in Canada, or whatever, right? But what are your thoughts regarding the tax situation, using this particular inability to deduct this item as an example, but also in your life, are you getting the bang for your buck out there with regards to taxes? Hmm. Everyone has been muted, and at least once this go around here. Okay. So I guess Kaizo is not hearing me, but I'll move on to Dr. Thunder. All right. What are
Yeah,
your thoughts so far about the
restate that.
tax stuff? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just restate real quick. Yeah.
One part of the question is directly about you and your taxes, to the degree to which you want to say, you want to talk smack about the IRS or not, or you want to sound like a responsible citizen. Do you think you're getting your bang for your buck when it comes to the taxes, right? That's really the base of the question. I mentioned certain things about Scandinavia and the kind of social welfare that they get with similar taxes that we pay over here, right? Do you think you're getting your bang for your buck?
Yeah. So the obvious answer to that second question there is no. We're not. I'm not getting the bang for my buck. So case in point, um, the schools are terrible in general. Now there are some outliers. You can go to certain parts of the country with public schools that where they're top 10 schools and like this. But then of course the issue is you don't want your kid to be indoctrinated with stuff that you don't want them to be talking to your kid about yet. You want to have the right to broach certain topics in a way that you feel comfortable at the pace that you would like to, not have the state decide, and some teacher with, blue hair or something to decide that, hey, it's ready to start talking to them about, pronouns or something, right? So you have that issue. But with respect to the actual educational product, there are a number of public schools, um, that are ranked highly. If you can live in those areas, close enough for you to get your kid to the school, then great. But in general, that's not the case. So, so one issue is I pay taxes, and up until recently, so I'm in the state of Ohio. Up until recently, um, it was not possible for me to get a subsidy for from the state. In other words, to get my taxes to be to be used to pay the school that I send my son to. It's a private school, private Catholic school, right? So the first reason was because it was private. The second reason, which is really the one that they really didn't like, was because it was religious. It was a religious school, right? So um, so we were sending him to private school this whole time. First, it was a Lutheran school, base school, then a Catholic school. And we're going to keep him in his Catholic school. We were sending him there, and I was paying his tuition, plus I was paying the school tax. Okay, that seems ridiculous to me. Totally ridiculous to me. And then also when you consider people that don't even have kids are paying a school tax, or their property taxes are being used to pay for schools. They don't even have kids, right? So now I've heard the argument that you know you should want there to be more educated kids because less of the educated, you'll have less of an issue with riffraff, in your community. In other words, but in my mind, that shouldn't be my responsibility. That should be law and order's responsibility. So police and whatnot should be responsible for, making sure that my community's safe. Because after all, I pay taxes for that too, right? So you expect me to help you? I'm, I'm, I'm helping you out by paying this tax, but then also, you know, I'm paying the taxes for, for the, for police, for policing, and it's like, dude, uh, so there's a basic issue there. Another issue that I found is, I'm a flat tax guy. I'm a flat tax guy. Um, I don't like this sort of progressive tax. Um, what I would like is you can establish whatever number you want. You could say once you're making 40,000 a year, then you pay whatever the percentage is. Okay, and then that percentage stays the same all the way up. Now, in for the sake of uh, getting more tax revenue from wealthy people, you could do a use tax, right? So you put a bigger taxation on expensive items, on luxury items. So that way you can get tax revenue, and there's less possibility for the wealthy to find loopholes to avoid having to pay whatever those taxes are, right? So I'm for a flat tax, because a graduated tax, especially in this uncanny valley you're talking about, there's not the sort of incentive to keep pushing and keep pushing to keep getting those raises, because as you get these raises, you start seeing these bigger and bigger bites out of your check. And one thing I noticed is, I one of the plateaus that you know, that I got over, I got past rather, or I got past to a particular plateau, and I noticed that the actual money that was going in my account was actually less money than it was before I got before I got the pay, the pay raise. So that is not that's not that is not an incentive for me to work another job, do X, Y, and Z, start a small business. Do it. It's not an incentive for me to do any of those other things. Now, I wanted to say something about the military. Um, Now, and shout out to those that have served in the military and made the ultimate sacrifice. Um, Shout out to them. Um, uh, However, I don't see those in military as really part of the actual job, the regular job market, because I don't see bureaucrats. I don't see folks that work for the government as part of that. I tend to look at the stuff that is organically exists within um, within the economy, the stuff that organically exists. So stuff like small businesses, um, manufacturing of certain items that people buy, whatever it is. I see that stuff as being actually part of and it's actually easier to quantify what's going on there because the government is taxing you for the military and and subsidizing the military is subsidizing university professors, their salaries is subsidizing. It's so I'm measuring things that are not being subsidized by taxes that you have to pay these taxes. So so I'm tending to look at it more like if people are buying these items and it's their free will to do so, that's the stuff that I would like to see us build up on more and incentivize more. As far as the bloated, oversized military budget, which basically only exists because we have been in the practice of nation building and going and putting out fires in other countries and not using that revenue, those resources to fix issues that are here. Okay, you have huge homeless populations. Matter of fact, I was just using uh, earlier today. Son and I went to church, and on the way home, he was talking about Mr. Beast. And Mr. Beast dropped out of high school, and Mr. Beast is and making all this money and stuff like this. And Mr. Beast's parents don't seem to have an issue with him. I said, okay, that's a good 1,000,000,000 to 1 odds because it's more likely, like much more likely that you'll be like this homeless guy out here that uh, that we just passed with the sign if you drop out of high school, right?
Dr. Th-
But we have all this. One second, we have all of these homeless issues. We're not doing anything to fix those issues, really. Those things are expanding and getting worse. And yes, I know you always had the poor with you.
Dr.
I know
Thunder,
that
do you
people
feel
tend to choose. Go ahead.
isn't the military fixing homeless people by giving people the opportunity to join the military?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but still,
So those
there's
who are
a
homeless are
there's a
people that don't
tax
qualify.
associated.
Well,
No, but that's a tax. There's a tax associated with that.
but there's a tax associated with just directly giving homeless people goods. Because
But,
what the military is doing is they're saying in exchange for a service, we will give you goods. What just giving goods to the homeless is saying in exchange for absolutely no contribution to society, we will give you goods. I
yeah,
think that
no. But there's another factor, and the other factor is the third party that's paying for this.
it's the same third
I'm the
party.
third party. No. The
Right,
third
right.
party is me.
No, I get it, and it's me too. But what I'm saying is, as a taxpayer, right, I would much rather pay a person to grab a rifle than pay a person to just grab money from me.
Well, actually, that's not exactly what I was talking about. I was not talking about necessarily a handout. I was talking
What
about
solution to
there's
homelessness do you recommend?
well, I think there's serious issues with job availability. There's all kinds of issues just
The
generally with the
military is
economy.
jobs.
No, the military, and like I said, by my definition, the military is a service, right? So it's a service that is being subsidized. Well, it's not just being subsidized; it's being outright bankrolled by mandatory taxation of the populace.
Well. Hold on a second. You guys want to talk about homeless, and you're saying your taxes. First of all, you're not getting taxed much for the homeless. It's something you barely can see. But let's really talk about what makes up the homeless. Why are people homeless? What makes them up? What makes up what makes up most of the homeless populations here? You want to call them useless and so on and so forth. People become homeless for a reason. You have to look at that too, and why some of your tax dollars and so forth are not addressing the problem of the homeless. And
Yeah, yeah. Well, so for instance, actually, this is a good
you
point.
have to look at that as well, and none of
Yeah,
you
yeah.
talk about
A high percentage of homeless are military veterans.
it. Many are veterans. That's some of your biggest part of the populations. Why are these veterans homeless? Why?
Well, because people aren't spending enough taxes to the military, perhaps. But no, I mean,
A
I
highly
think
ridiculous
that
answer.
no,
It's highly
I'm
ridiculous.
joking. Well, I'm joking, though.
Well,
But I mean, I think in understanding the homeless problem, one would have to have a point of view of Ike and I, where we've lived in the Bay Area and we've seen it get flooded by homeless, and for
I live in New York City. Well, not New York City. I'm in a suburb, but I certainly work in the city, and I certainly see homeless a lot. And we're not talking about just some of the refugees that are coming in. We're talking about kind of indigent homeless. You see these populations going through. A lot of them are veterans here in this city as well. Many of them are. Why is
no,
this?
no. In addition to just being a major
It's
city, being a draw for homeless, but there's also the weather aspect. A homeless person would much rather, live in the warmth of the California Bay Area than burn a garbage can under a New York freeway.
Well, no,
So,
well, that's not really realistic. That's not really accurate. That's not really true.
that's not
It's not like
accurate.
well, no, it's not like people are in New York saying, "Well, listen, I'm gonna take a train over to California and do
I
that."
think that's exactly what they're saying.
You've had some people in other states, in the southern states and so forth, who get subsidized by places like California and so forth, literally put people on trains and ship them over to California. And you have some of this crazy political stuff going on, but I don't see how this situation is actually being addressed. And then people saying, "Well, I'm wasting my money on my tax dollars on the homeless and so forth." Shit is crazy when you hear people talk like this.
Okay, well,
What is causing that issue? And we have to get to that, because once again, as Dr. Thunder started to address, well, a lot of these people that I was bringing that up just to make sure you guys were on point. Many of these people are from the military, and we're looking at these issues, and it's one that we're not looking at realistically and addressing, and our tax dollars that are supposed to be addressing that are not.
Yeah,
Anyway,
Nagon,
okay. So
what is your
I think
thesis as to the
okay.
cause? Hold on 1 second. Nagon, succinctly, what is your thesis as to the cause, and what is your answer to the question? You had the question about why so many
there's a lot of it.
veterans.
A lot of it is the cost of housing. Housing costs are housing, affordable housing, huge issue. Okay, then we're dealing with our factors of healthcare, mental health, and so forth. Our healthcare systems, which politically many have not vested in properly. Those states that are shipping people over into California and so forth, that have cut back on the Affordable Care Act and all that kind of stuff. You have a lot of people who are mentally ill who do not have the backing up and the dollars and so forth that we pay tax dollars into, where these people should be getting certain levels of care, not getting that as well. We're having those issues. Certainly, we're having issues with respect to but We have issues once again, which is another healthcare issue. I just want to say it, with drug addiction and so forth, which are once again other healthcare issues. All right, it's not like these drug addicts are running around, pushing drugs all over the place. And these are kingpins and dealers. These are people who have a pretty severe sickness, and a lot of that is not being treated of course, as we have our mentally ill populations as well. And some people have become jobless, homeless, and they've been knocked just freshly right out of their homes, and they don't have places really to go to. New York City, $5,600 to live in Midtown Manhattan for a studio apartment and this kind of shit. Who's got that kind of bread? I live in a private home. All right, 20 rooms. What the freak? I don't pay that per month. So I'm looking at situations that are that we're not addressing, and a lot of us want to talk about handouts. What handouts? What handouts are you talking about? Who's
Well,
getting
okay.
I mean, crazy talk, but I'm just checking the record a little bit. But I said what I had to say, so I'm just you guys can kind of take it from there.
Okay, so what I was talking about more so with that, well, let's start here. You mentioned housing costs is one of the reasons that making someone homeless. What suggestion would you offer?
If you're asking for me, if affordable housing has to be built, we have certainly dollars for it, but affordable housing has to be built.
What suggestion would you offer to remedy the housing cost problem?
Say that again.
You say public
Repeat
housing?
that again. I'm sorry.
You said public housing?
Affordable. I said affordable housing.
So they make a house and
affordable housing. Affordable housing has to be, the cities are going to have to adopt more affordable housing because we have very powerful real estate lobbies, and people are without a doubt are grabbing a lot of properties and so forth and running them up as high as they can. It's about profits. And
Would you change certain zoning laws, for example? There are cities like San Francisco, New York, and such change certain zoning laws and get this shit built.
You certainly can do it. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But hold on.
This
Game changer. One second here. We have to move on and land, but you will get your chance in the last comments, which we're about to get to. In other words, your closing remarks, if you will, right? But I wanted Nagone, then we'll go to react specifically to the taxation question. We've seen where you stand now regarding, well, perhaps the efficacy of the money being spent, and perhaps money needs to be spent, perhaps it's not being spent right, blah, 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 right? But what do you think about the taxes? Are we getting a bang for our buck? Are we paying enough now for those things that you think need to be done? Or is it just a case where, it costs like $84,000 for a tent in, San Francisco, because obviously it's being done through a series of government contracts where there's a lot of grift, and there's a homeless industrial complex and stuff like that. Do you think that there's enough money in the system, or do you think that we actually need to be taxed more? And then your final thoughts, Nagone, as well. So
okay, as far as so much that depends on where you are. Where I am, let's say in my city, or where I am, say in Westchester, Scarsdale, tax dollars for your schools, property taxes, stuff like that are high. But when you go to Scarsdale High School, I think maybe out of 30,000 or so public high schools we have in this country, Scarsdale High School is rated 665 out of over 30,000 high schools, secondary school institutions here, rated 665. That's pretty high. So, you're basically sending your person from your child from a public school. It's almost like it's pretty much almost like a private institution. So and if you ever went inside of Scarsdale High School, it's ridiculous. Place looks like NASA or something. So so as far as that's concerned, property taxes high. What do I pay? $22,000 a year or so, somewhere around there in property taxes. So you do, things get handled properly. It's expensive, but you have a lot of things getting taken care of, whereas other places maybe not. So much of it is where you are. and what neighborhoods that you are in. But I do think, a lot of people want to see some level of taxes reduced. But as we look at the overall tax rates, it's still the highest. The people who pay the highest taxes are those who are making the most money. And I think people who are pretty much under the $120,000 range pay about 4% of the taxes in this country, maybe a little bit less. And if we were to kind of average everything out overall with rich, poor, and everybody else put in there, I think the average rate comes out to about 14% or so tax rate. But certainly people who are not making the lion's share of dollars are not paying the lion's share in taxes, even though that is the perception. That's actually not really the truth. So are we paying a lot? I think there are those who feel as though that we are being taxed a little bit too much and are not getting a lot for where they are. And depending on where they are in the country, I would say so much of this is very much regional and very much a political issue. A lot of. So it's difficult to say. In my area, it is. If I had my grandson live with me, I would have him at Scarsdale High School, and he would do very well. But where he is, upstate, it's they pay a little higher taxes there. When I had my house up there as well, we were doing pretty well from a tax perspective. We weren't paying as much down here, but Monroe, Woodbury, and those high schools were very good as well. So they were doing very well. So depending on where you are, you seem to be doing pretty all right. But the whole tax piece is very much political football. People do feel as though they're being squeezed a bit and maybe are not getting as much. But it's difficult to say. If you have kids in school and the schools are good, then you're feeling like it is. If your kids are in schools and schools are bad, but you're paying fairly high tax rates, like I see some people in the Yonkers school system who are not doing that well from some of their public high schools, but yet they're paying some higher tax rates. Some people are upset, and that's a function of literally public government there and how they are actually regulating and working with their schools, which are problematic. So,
Hey,
anyway,
Nagon, can I ask you a quick question?
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So here's the question. So I had started to present my flat tax perhaps solution to some of these issues. So flat tax with then on top of it a use tax for luxury items. What do you think of that? Do you think that would inherently be problematic? Could that be somewhat of a solution to give some relief to those that are not using luxury items, but then also still to be able to get some of that tax revenue from wealthy folks, which are the ones that are going to be buying?
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing. For flat taxes, I don't look at it as it being totally or particularly equitable. So in some areas where people should be maybe taxed more because of their situations, flat tax doesn't really answer that. For those places that are less inclined and don't have as much income or less of a tax base, then that could be a tax raising for them. So it doesn't really you call it across the board, but it doesn't really answer for pretty much for everyone. So as far as this whole overall flat tax piece, depending on where you're at, no, I'm not necessarily one who's looking at that as being equitable across the board. No.
Okay.
Okay, so varying pools and whatnot. Did you land your plane with regards to your final thoughts, Nagon? Yes, and we heard your contribution here. And with your final thoughts, I want to about this very specific thing here. Do you think that these startup companies deserve to cut off their research and development, or you think because they're pulling in a lot of revenue, hence these they can deal with these kinds of things, even though they might not be profitable, but they're still paying taxes on things because they're still growing?
Well, startup companies are going to get a bit of a break to start up and kind of move. Most startup companies are going to operate at a deficit for a few years before they become profitable. So that's just a part of the business model. So do I think that that this is going to hurt these companies or stop them from expanding or growing, or experimental expenditures are no longer? Well, what specifically is the question you're asking me? I don't know if I heard it
Yeah,
correct.
really, it's a question about where this thing is targeted. It's not going to do anything to touch any of the big companies. Basically, this particular kind of write-off is only kind of consequential for somebody who is
Yeah,
starting up, right? And they're paying developers, they're paying software for these developers, they have lab equipment and stuff
yeah,
like that, right?
that's
And they
right.
might just simply be breaking even. They pay themselves, they pay everybody, and they're just breaking even.
And
So
these
they get to write off that aspect. But
that's exactly correct. I have a business, with my business that I have, which is primarily me and maybe one or two other people that I have working with me. You're able to write you're able to write certain kinds of expenses off. But if you're a brand new company, that's the biggest tax shelter you can really have. And it's not just to shelter dollars for the sake of sheltering, but you do have a right, to write off your
okay,
all
so
your
you're just saying get all this stuff done within that 3 years where you're able to kind of run at a loss, and after that you're going to need to start taking these hits. You better be making be profitable at that point, or spend less on R&D, or do this amortization, which they're allowing you to do.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, you can do that, but I mean, let's take a look at like a Facebook or whatever. These guys, how long did they, as a startup, how long did they run as a deficit before they became profitable? How long? How long did they ran close to 10 years before they could before they started really claiming profits on really on their books. So you can run at a deficit for a while as long as you can keep the baseline operation going and keep some money going. But your write-offs will actually help you to continue growing your business. That's kind of where we are with respect to that. Hopefully, that answers your question.
Can I ask something?
Yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
When it comes to years of deficits, I know I'm not tripping, but how can black businesses get in on that hustle? Because that was the same thing with Amazon.
No,
called the money market.
that is a key question this brother just dropped, and this is where a big issue really is, because you see, for us to really get in and get started, the biggest problem that we have, unlike the white companies do, is we have a very difficult time getting funding to get our
Mhm.
companies going.
Well,
And the banks and so forth are very prejudicial against us. Even in venture capital funding, we're not getting that. And even on the Black Brain Trust, we had gone into that deeply with angel funding and how we're not getting it 1%, 2% of that, where others are getting it, where we're not getting these startups, especially in the tech arena and other places. We're not getting the startup money.
we talked about it
Which is
last week,
probably
LAR. We got to be willing to bend
which
the
is probably
rules.
well, you're talking about bending the rules, but then the rules are made for some people to get hammered and others not to get hammered as much. And we're not getting the dollars, the funding in to really play at that level. And that's hurting us. And that's something that we've been complaining about and talking about a lot. I don't see a lot of people addressing that issue as much as we should, because it is a big problem in black business. And we're talking about some of the most talented, qualified professionals that we have in our community are facing this. So and that's men and women. So that's just not across one group, but that's across both sides. But I'll just bring that up and move forward on there. Go ahead, you guys.
Okay, so let's great there. Now we're going to start getting kind of closing thoughts there. Unless you have anything to add, Nagon, I'm going to move on to Game Changer with regards to closing remarks. Game Changer.
Oh, I thought you were asking the gone.
Yeah, I did,
my
but
closing remarks is
yeah, go ahead.
no fair enough. My closing remarks are this whole affordable housing thing is part of the U structure that I'm talking about. So take a guy, right, who works hard. Let's just say he has a physically intensive job that pays below the median, but above minimum wage. You know, he makes somewhere in between there. Let's just say he's a roofer or something like that. So he works for 20 years. He saves up. And he spent his life breathing in roof tar. And then he saves up and he finally gets a chance to purchase a home. And he does. He purchases a nice, modest sized home. And then the government comes along and said, hey, homeless person, how would you like to live next to this roofer for doing nothing? See how that completely undermines and really disrespects his lifetime of work. That's what we're doing to the Americans that are in the middle. By giving a group of people, you know, benefits for not doing anything, which is the equivalent to your benefits for doing everything, is a disrespect, and it undermines what you have done. And it also disincentivizes people from actually becoming things like roofers or pretty much any job that's in the middle. You know, and people take on this mentality like, you know, you're either a boss or you're nothing at all. That's what we have done to this society. And it's all to placate, you know, people who, quite frankly, largely don't even vote, read the homeless. So we really have to, once again, we have to take a critical view of what to do about these people. And sometimes we're going to have to make harsh decisions in regards to that. It's unfortunate, but true. Now, to further what Dr. Thunder was saying about it's the responsibility of the police to deal with derelict children. No, it's the responsibility of the parents. But unfortunately, we have parents who are derelicts themselves, you know, who would normally not function in society, but they are allowed to function in this society because they live in this artificial subsidized reality to where even an imbecile who don't raise their kids can still have the basic essentials of life. That is what we have created with our desire to make things fair. And unfortunately, it has become very unfair for, once again, those in the middle.
Well put there. So Kaizo may or may not be back. Kaizo checking 1, Kaizo checking 1, 2. Ladies and gentlemen, because we are going to move on to LAR for the closing thoughts here, right? Because we touched on basically 3 things today, right? And all of them kind of surround the economy somewhat. We're talking about the protest, which resulted in 28 Google employees being fired, right? For doing shenanigans and, you know, doing a sit-in, protesting Google's contract with the Israeli government, 20-something billion dollars, right? And they got tore out the frame, as Nacone would say, for trying to, you know, you don't step in front of $27 billion. You're not that entitled. It's not gonna happen. And also we talk about the inflation and its effects, its causes, what we're going to see regarding the elections and how it dovetails with inflation and whatnot. And now and also taxes and whatnot. But LAR, what are your closing thoughts on everything? And then we'll let Dr. Thunder take us out.
I think, you know, putting all 3 of those things together, this is one of the most interesting things about our society now, is because we're opportunistic and individualists at the same time. When, you know, you do the wrong thing, you can lose your job, and people want to be, you know, everybody wants to be an individual, but you're gonna wind up being a broke individual sometimes. And let's see if you can go through that. Same thing with the inflation. You know, people want to be on their own, and you get on social media, you see all these people, you know, playing these games, vacationing and kicking it, and you're like, where are these people getting all this money from? And you're trying to figure it out because it doesn't add up. And the reason I say it doesn't add up, because if you live on social media and you see all these people traveling, you never see them at home. That's for a reason. They never show you a picture of home. That's for a reason. And even in pushing forward to the tax part of it, and that's what I mean by opportunism. Sometimes what we're getting into now is, in my opinion, is people looking for a PPP hustle because the bottom is falling out of America. And when you look at the auto industry, where it got bailed out, but somehow it's still failing. You look at the banking industry, where it got bailed out, but somehow they're predicting all these banks wind up shutting. What you're seeing is a country not in decline, not necessarily in decline. I say that in decline based on greed. People got so greedy that they underserviced and overcharged everybody, and you're about to run out of customers. So what we're seeing now, what we're about to see, is, and unfortunate to say this, um, a rise in homelessness, a rise in crime, and a rise in, what do you call that? Vigilante justice, because you don't see this country actually looking out for people like that. So people gonna be on their own in a sense. So that's my 2 cents.
All right, all right, all right. A rise in all those things, and LAR reminding us that rich individualism is different from broke individualism. So people need to be able to be clear on the difference there. But Dr. Thunder, go ahead and give us your closing thoughts as we round out round out this episode of Case Closed. And let me give a shout out again to the super chatters. We had 2 today. One man went to Mo. Shout out to him, and also Dati Galdem with $20. Okay, Dr. Thunder, what are your closing thoughts here? You got the floor. You got the mic.
Yeah. So yeah, really great conversation. Um, so as a response to the game changer remark about the parents are supposed to take care of the kids, that's true. Uh, but the reason that we have law enforcement is because somebody didn't do a good job, and that's on every level. So, um, and parents are not, we're not paying parents to police their own kids, right?
Yes, we are. It's called welfare.
That's an ex.
We're literally paying
Uh,
parents to raise their own kids. They're just doing a crap job at it.
yeah, well, I suppose, but I suppose you'd have to be able to guarantee some sort of outcomes. With law enforcement, there's a guaranteed outcome, and the guaranteed outcome is if this person doesn't stop doing X, Y, and Z, then we're going to take them off your hands for 8 to 10 years or whatever it is, so that other folks that are law-abiding citizens are not being, uh, harassed or put in a bogus situation because other folks don't know how to follow the rules. Yes, ultimately, and I started out by saying, be fruitful and multiply is the basis for civilization. And if you don't have that, you can't get that right. And of course, part of that is good parenting, people taking responsibility, and even before multiplying, being fruitful, so that therefore they don't need welfare. But that's been such a, that's been so you know out of the equation for so long, and it's degraded so far, that there's no amount of betting on the future that you can do to actually get yourself out of this hole. It's the issue that we have with Social Security. That's why it's being and will be amended further and changed further as far as the age that you can retire and take Social Security. It's because there's not enough people. There's not enough people paying enough taxes, paying enough into Social Security. So I don't see this as an issue that's going to get solved, and especially when you start talking about, okay, well, we have all of these resources, we've got all this tax money we're paying to the military, we got tax money we're paying to X, Y, Z. That's not stuff that I want to pay, right? It's not stuff that I necessarily see as a balanced, is being particularly balanced. And there's lobbies and political forces that are going to keep that stuff in place. So then again, we're not going to make any cuts. We're not going to we're not going to make any cuts, but we're just going to say, hey, um, we'll just kick the can down the street. It's just, it's never going to work.
All right. Highest level conversation, the most relevant topics in the space. Case closed 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Sunday. And we close, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. Shout out to Nagone, Game Changer, Kaizo, Dr. Thunder, and LAR Movement. Until next time, peace. We're out.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.